My father leaned across the pristine white tablecloth of the upscale Mexican restaurant, flicking his fork in my direction with the same polished condescension he used when sealing deals. "Don't mind Lisa," he said smoothly, his smile rehearsed. "She's still our little work in progress, the one who chose a hobby instead of real commissions." "Tracy," my older sister laughed softly, the sound perfectly timed, her fingers tightening around her fiancé's hand as her diamond caught the light. George didn't laugh. He simply watched me spoon, suspended brow slightly raised, as if he sensed a story no one else wanted to hear. "I'm Lisa Reyes, 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet anomaly in a family addicted to applause. My parents built a boutique real estate empire in Los Angeles, luxury listings, flawless flips, immaculate reputations, and Tracy became their living proof of success. Their world worshipped optics, commission numbers, neighborhood zip codes, and the shine of status symbols. Worth was measured in square footage and closing deadlines. I never fit that equation. I didn't want open houses or staged smiles. I wanted to build something that mattered, something that could change how systems worked. So I built a fintech startup from a cramped Silver Lake apartment, surviving on cold coffee and pre-dawn calls with developers across the globe. To me, it was purpose. To them, it was immaturity. No galas, no schmoozing, no designer image, just evidence in their eyes that I was failing. They loved me, but quietly resented me for not fitting their brand. What they never realized was that my silence wasn't stagnation, it was momentum. That dinner wasn't a celebration, it was theater. Tracy's engagement was the headline, and I was the disclaimer. As my father bragged and my mother praised, I faded into the background, invisible as ever. When attention finally turned to me, the room cooled. They spoke about me, not to me, dismantling my choices with polite smiles. I said nothing. I watched condensation slide down my glass, steady and patient. My silence wasn't surrender. It was a countdown. And that night, it was almost over. If this story made your fists tighten, or if you've ever sat at a family table feeling like the problem everyone wanted to fix, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so the next story of betrayal, awakening, and ice-cold justice finds you the moment it drops. Your voice keeps these buried stories alive. That dinner was meant to celebrate Tracy's engagement, yet the upscale Mexican restaurant in Los Angeles felt more like a high-stakes boardroom than a place for family toasts. The low chandelier light bounced off polished glasses and silverware, while my father treated the table like his personal podium. Joseph leaned back, gesturing expansively as he detailed Tracy's latest coup, a seven-figure Beverly Hills listing that closed in record time with a cash buyer who waived inspections and contingencies. "That's the art of it," he declared, voice carrying just enough to dominate the room. "Spot the value, push the right buttons, and walk away with a commission that pays for itself twice over." Shirley nodded vigorously, her eyes sparkling as she turned to George. "And you, with your venture instincts, must recognize that same killer edge. Tracy always says you can smell a winner before the numbers even hit the spreadsheet." George offered a polite smile, but his focus kept shifting across the table to me, as though he sensed something off balance in the polished narrative. I sat there in silence, fork idly pushing a cooling enchilada across my plate, the cheese hardening into a useless lump. The laughter rolled around me. Tracy's bright, confident peal, Joseph's booming agreement, Shirley's softer chime, but none of it reached me. I was there physically, yet completely erased, reduced to ambient noise amid the clink of margarita glasses and the sizzle of fajitas on nearby platters. Then the spotlight swung my way, predictable as clockwork. Joseph's gaze settled on me with that familiar blend of exasperation and theatrical patience. "Of course, Lisa is still dabbling in her little fintech fantasy," he said, cutting the air with his hand before anyone could probe deeper. "Honey, it's just tinkering, one of a million apps floating around out there. Nothing that moves the needle." Tracy slid in seamlessly, her tone wrapped in faux sympathy. We even tried to set her up with something solid at the firm real office routine, answering calls, handling contracts, getting her used to structure. But she clings to her independence. The word landed like a velvet-covered jab, soft enough to pass as concern, sharp enough to sting. I kept my eyes lowered, letting the conversation swirl without engaging. The enchilada sat untouched, the salsa congealing around it. George, however, did not join the easy dismissal. He set his spoon down with deliberate care, the small clink cutting through the chatter like a signal. His expression remained calm, but there was genuine curiosity in his eyes, not the polite boredom the rest of the table wore. He looked directly at me and asked, voice low and steady amid the surrounding noise, "What market gap are you actually addressing with it?" The question hung there, simple yet pointed, slicing through the surface gloss of the evening like a blade no one else had noticed. For the first time that night, someone had asked me to explain instead of explaining me away. When the velvet folder containing the bill slid onto the table, Joseph turned it into a performance, pulling out his black card with exaggerated flair and placing it down like he was bestowing a favor. He caught my eye with that practiced look of paternal indulgence, the one that always carried an undercurrent of superiority. "No need to worry about this one, Lisa," he said, volume-pitched, so the entire table heard. "I've got it covered. You focus on saving up for rent." The words wrapped in kindness, but the message was unmistakable. I was the ongoing expense, the family member who required subsidizing while the others pulled their weight. I gave a single nod, throat constricting as the server took the card away. Silence hardened inside me, like poured concrete pressing against every breath. A month prior, the rejection had cut deeper and been far more public. My family threw a cocktail party at their Hollywood Hills mansion, poolside string lights glowing against the city skyline, waitstaff circulating trays of chilled caviar and vintage champagne to a crowd of real estate tycoons, private equity partners, and high-profile developers. I discovered the event only after it happened, scrolling through my cousin Vicky's Instagram stories. Tracy laughing with a billionaire property investor, Joseph clinking glasses with a celebrity broker, Shirley posing in front of the Infinity Edge view. The guest list was impeccable. Everyone who could move a needle in LA's real estate world was present. Everyone except me. When I called my mother the following morning to understand why her tone remained breezy and unruffled. "Sweetheart, we didn't want to overwhelm you," she explained. "It was a very technical crowd, cap rates, comps, market forecasts, all that jargon. We didn't want you to feel inadequate." Inadequate. The word lodged in my mind like a splinter. It wasn't forgetfulness or a simple oversight. It was calculated isolation, shielding their pristine brand from any hint of my supposed shortcomings. They had erected an invisible barrier around their circle and positioned me firmly outside it all, while framing the exclusion as protection. Vicky had witnessed the entire evening. She texted me as the party wound down, "Cousin, they missed out on you big time. You would have owned that room if they'd let you in." I stared at the message for a long time before replying with a simple thanks. Her support felt genuine, but it also highlighted how stark the divide had become. Someone outside the inner circle could see the erasure clearly, while those inside remained blind to it. At the restaurant, as Joseph signed the receipt with a satisfied flourish and pocketed the card, the memory resurfaced sharp and unbidden. Inadequate wasn't merely a casual slight. It was the convenient label they slapped on every barrier, every exclusion, every decision to keep me sidelined from their network, their pride, their legacy. They quarantined me from their brand to preserve its shine, never realizing how much breathing room that gave me to construct something entirely separate and far more powerful. Moments like these make you want to scream, to shatter the polite facade and force acknowledgement. But silence can carry more weight than any outburst. Sometimes the most devastating response is holding your ground until reality itself forces the reckoning. Last year on Veterans Day, the neighborhood barbecue turned into another showcase for my father's effortless cruelty. Smoke curled from the grill as Joseph stood at the center of a loose circle of real estate businessmen tongs, in one hand beer in the other, holding court with the same confidence he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. He flipped a ribeye and delivered his punchline with perfect timing. And Lisa. She's still finding herself, he said, making exaggerated air quotes with the tongs, while the group broke into that familiar, comfortable chuckle, the kind that feels harmless in the moment, but leaves a bruise. I stood there holding my plate for a second too long before setting it down and walking straight to my car. Their laughter chased me across the lawn, down the driveway, and into the driver's seat, ringing in my ears the entire drive home, until I pulled into my parking spot and let the engine die in silence. 3 days before this engagement dinner, Tracy called me without warning. Her voice came through polished and efficient, the way she sounds when she's managing optics. "Hey, quick thing about the dinner," she began. "I figured money might be tight right now, so I can Venmo you a few hundred. Go pick up a dress that actually looks presentable. First impressions count with George, and I don't want anything dulling the sharp image I'm building." She packaged it as concern, but the undertone was clear. My appearance was a potential liability to her perfect setup. I thanked her calmly and turned it down, saying I already had something suitable. She pressed once more. "You sure it's zero hassle?" But I repeated my no and ended the call. The exchange stuck with me afterward, pulling up an older memory I usually kept locked away. In college, Tracy had once asked to see my early notes on a fintech concept, a simple system for instant low-fee cross-border payments that bypassed traditional banks. She took the outline, rephrased it slightly, and submitted it as her own project in a business class, earning an A and professor praise. When the semester ended, she never mentioned it again. I never confronted her. I was too busy iterating on the actual prototype to chase credit. But the incident left a quiet mark. She had borrowed something I built from scratch, used it to boost her own standing, and then dropped it like it had no real value. That same dynamic replayed in every interaction since she took momentum when it served her, gained from it, then moved on, while I kept building alone, refining what she had briefly sampled. Jealousy from a sibling rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives in small, repeated thefts, ideas, attention credit, and lingers in the background like low-grade poison. If you've ever felt it from someone who shares your blood, you know the exact sting, the quiet betrayal of watching your effort dismissed as disposable, while theirs is treated as untouchable gold. While the mockery continued around the table, my thoughts slipped away from their words and settled on the truth I had guarded so carefully. Reyes Pay wasn't some idle side project. It was an AI-driven payment platform designed to eliminate the friction in global transactions, processing instant, secure cross-border payments with minimal fees, predictive fraud detection, and seamless integration that traditional banks couldn't touch. What started as sketches on a notepad in my apartment had evolved into a full-scale operation running quietly in the background. The 4 a.m. calls with the London development team had become the rhythm of my life. We reviewed code commits, stress-tested algorithms, and mapped out scaling strategies, while the city outside my window stayed dark. Those hours paid off. We closed a Series C round with a consortium of international investors who recognized the platform's potential to reshape how money moved across borders. The valuation reached billion-dollar status, a number that quietly eclipsed the cumulative value of every property my father had ever listed or flipped in his decades-long career. Strict NDAs kept everything locked down. I couldn't mention the traction, the pilot programs with emerging markets, or the aggressive interest from Silicon Valley heavyweights who were already bidding to lead our next funding round. One memory stood out sharply: an early investor call where they dangled a modest term sheet to get in before the valuation spiked. I turned it down without hesitation. My pulse raced as I ended the call, fingers trembling slightly on the phone, because I knew that refusal was calculated. I was holding out for partners who could propel us to the next level, not settle for quick cash. Signing those NDAs felt like arming a silent weapon. The restraint wasn't weakness. It was strategy, letting underestimation become my greatest advantage, while the platform gained unstoppable momentum. The irony hit hardest in that moment at the table. They reduced it all to tinkering, a harmless hobby without real stakes, while Reyes Pay had quietly become a legitimate disruptor in a trillion-dollar industry. Major fintech players in Silicon Valley weren't just watching, they were competing fiercely to secure a stake, ready to commit hundreds of millions, because they saw what my family never bothered to look for: a system that could redefine payments on a global scale. They thought they were safeguarding their legacy by keeping me at arm's length. In truth, they had handed me the perfect cover to construct something that would soon make their entire world seem small and outdated by comparison. Every dismissal, every patronizing comment, every time they laughed off my direction only fueled the drive to prove them wrong, not with shouting or confrontation, but with results that spoke louder than any argument ever could. The silence I maintained wasn't defeat. It was the calm before the revelation that would force them to confront exactly how wrong they had been. Throughout the entire meal, George was the only one who genuinely listened. While the rest of the table dismissed or talked past me, he kept redirecting with sharp, focused questions that cut through the noise. He asked about the precise market gap Reyes Pay filled, how we solved friction in cross-border remittances for underserved regions, and then pushed further into burn rate details, current monthly spend runway length, and how we allocated capital between engineering hires and user acquisition. His inquiries were clinical yet respectful, treating my responses as data points worth analyzing rather than anecdotes to brush aside. Tracy caught the change in tone right away. She leaned closer to George, her smile tight and performative, and interrupted before I could finish explaining our customer lifetime value model. "She's not unicorn material like you, babe," she said, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "She's just playing around, nothing that's going to move the needle or justify real burn rate discussions." The comment was wrapped in laughter meant to invite the table to agree, but George didn't bite. He waited patiently for me to complete my thought on retention strategies, then gave a small nod, signaling he had absorbed every word. Shirley exhaled a long, theatrical sigh, the kind she reserved for situations she deemed irredeemable. "We just hope she finds a stable man to pay the bills soon," she said, reaching over to pat my hand once more, "so she can stop all this nonsense and settle into something that actually makes sense." The sentence carried the familiar weight of resignation, as though my entire direction in life could be corrected with the right relationship and a predictable income stream. George's polite smile disappeared entirely. He placed his fork down with quiet precision, leaned forward across the table, elbows planted, and locked eyes with me. The shift was immediate and unmistakable. The relaxed dinner companion replaced by the seasoned investor who had just detected real potential beneath the surface dismissal. "What did you say the name of your company was again?" he asked, his voice low and measured, slicing cleanly through the lingering echo of my mother's sigh. I held his gaze without flinching. "Reyes Pay," I answered evenly. The word dropped into the conversation like a single stone into still water, sending ripples outward that no one else yet fully understood. George's spoon hit the plate with a sharp metallic clink that cut the air like a gunshot. His eyes widened instantly, pupils flaring as the pieces snapped into place. He froze for a split second, then disregarded the entire table. My father's bewildered stare, my mother's parted lips, Tracy's rigid posture, and locked onto me with the intensity of someone who had just spotted a unicorn in the wild after months of fruitless hunting. Without breaking eye contact, he reached for his phone, thumb swiping fast across the screen until the Bloomberg article appeared. He flipped the device around and thrust it toward the center of the table so the headline blazed in stark black type: "Billionaire Ghost Founder, L.R. Reyes, the Invisible Disruptor." No photo, just the Reyes Pay logo, bolded in the lead, and my initials woven through the first paragraph describing how the platform had silently become one of fintech's most elusive and valuable assets. George's voice came out low, urgent, directed solely at me. "My firm has been chasing you for 8 straight months," he said. We submitted multiple term sheets to lead your Series C millions committed top-of-the-cap table terms, but we got completely ghosted by your legal firewall every single time. You're the boss I've been trying to reach. The table plunged into absolute silence. Joseph's face turned ashen-colored, draining until he resembled a statue carved from pale marble. His mouth opened, opened again, but only a faint stammer escaped. Shirley's lips parted in shock, hand frozen mid-air where she had been about to reach for her glass, no sound emerging as her eyes darted between the phone and me. Tracy's expression fractured, eyes narrowing into a glare of raw jealousy and horror. Cheeks flushing crimson as the truth landed. The sister she had ridiculed as a perpetual amateur was the founder her fiancé had pursued relentlessly. I lifted my water glass slowly, took a measured sip, the cool liquid steadying the moment, and set it back down without a tremor. No outburst, no dramatic flourish, no raised voice or overturned plate. Just calm, unhurried confirmation in the face of their stunned immobility. The silence stretched thick and charged, as the invisible hierarchy they had enforced for years collapsed under the weight of one simple truth. That quiet aftermath carried more power than any shout ever could. If you've ever fantasized about a single moment where justice arrives without fanfare, where the people who dismissed you are forced to see exactly who you became, you understand why that stillness feels so profoundly sweet. I placed my napkin beside my plate with quiet precision, the fabric folding neatly as I rose from the chair. The scrape of wood against tile was the only sound breaking the heavy stillness. "It was a pleasure meeting you, George," I said, voice even and composed. "Have your team contact my assistant on Monday. We can go over the Series C details then." I scanned the table once, meeting each stunned gaze without anger or triumph. "I have a board call at 7 tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening." Joseph's fingers twitched over the black card still resting on the table, his usual confidence evaporated. Shirley's hand remained suspended, mid-air, lips parted in wordless shock. Tracy stared at her lap, face flushed crimson, the diamond on her finger suddenly looking smaller under the restaurant's warm lights. They appeared diminished, shrunken figures caught in a spotlight that had turned unforgiving. I walked through the dining room without a backward glance. The cool Los Angeles night air met me at the door, sharp and cleansing. The silence trailing behind wasn't the old invisibility I had carried for years. It was the sound of their constructed world contracting around them. Within a week, the consequences unfolded swiftly. Vicky, still reeling from what she had witnessed that night, posted a single cryptic Instagram story, an exterior shot of the restaurant, with the overlay text, "Family secrets revealed at dinner." No tags, no explanations, but the post reached the right eyes. In LA's interconnected real estate community, where deals often hinge on reputation and relationships, rumors spread like wildfire through group chats, private messages, and whispered calls. Two high-profile listings my family had been finalizing collapsed almost immediately. One was a multi-million-dollar Hollywood Hills estate. The buyer withdrew, citing concerns about family stability after hearing secondhand accounts of the dinner fallout. The other was a commercial property in downtown LA that evaporated when a key partner quietly backed out, citing trust issues in the network. Word of mouth in that circle moves faster than any contract. Once credibility cracks, repair becomes nearly impossible. Social media amplification turned a private moment into professional damage that no apology could fully undo. Tracy's email arrived the following Monday, a lengthy message filled with belated praise, explanations of how proud she was and pleas for understanding. I read the subject line, "I'm so sorry," then deleted the entire thing without opening the body. I blocked her number, my parents' numbers, and every remaining family contact. The severance was absolute, no final conversation, no lingering threads, just a clean break to safeguard the space I had finally claimed. Never underestimate someone because of how they appear or dismiss their pursuits as mere hobbies. Persistence delivers justice on its own timeline. But severing toxic ties is the truest way to protect your freedom. Your peace is worth more than their approval ever was. If this story resonated with you, hit like to show support, share it with anyone who needs to hear it, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tale of quiet strength and rightful reckoning. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment, sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.